some very interesting reports today, so I'm hoping everyone will be able to have their say and make comments as need be. If we can start then with apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillors Clive Lloyd and Cyril Anderson, and from Jason Garcia, Audit Wales.
Yeah. Could then I ask for any disclosures of interest, please?
Chair, just to have clarification, Tracy, if possible, agenda item 10, the item, I'm a member of the governing body, Pendrafod, and item 11, I'm a member of the Port Authority. Is this for information purposes, or is there a need to actually declare interest?
I would have thought you would have to declare on those two items, but if you do feel it better to declare, it would be a personal interest in any event. It wouldn't.
Okay. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll put personal interest for the book.
Thank you. Councillor Mike White?
Yes.
Mike.
Yes. And I'd like to declare personal interest as being a member of the Port Health Authority as well, please.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Black?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll declare a personal interest as a member of Pendrafod governing body as well.
Thank you. Julie Davis?
I'd like to declare personal interest in item 7.
Councillor Rayner? You're on mute, Councillor Rayner.
Sorry, I'd like to declare a personal interest as Governor of Penifro Primary and Olkfur Comprehensive School.
Thank you. Thank you all. Councillor Black, is your hand still up for a reason? That's no more then. We can move on to the minutes of the meeting of the 13th of July. We'll take them page by page for accuracy, and any comments, please stop me. Page 1. Councillor Mike Lewis. Or Councillor Jennifer Rayner.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. My comment is on page 2.
Okay. And what's the comment?
Yes, item 12, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. I declared an interest. It's a dreadful echo on this line. Annual report of school audits. I believe that should be 2020 to 21, not as it is written.
Thank you. Okay, if we can move around page 3, page 4, page 5, and page 6. Are we happy to approve those minutes? Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you very much. Thank you. If we can move on to agenda item 4, which is the corporate risk overview 21-22 quarter 1. And if I can invite Richard Rowlands to introduce the paper. Richard, if you're in, can you take it that we've read the report? So
okay, thank you, Chair.
If you can pick up any key points you'd like the committee to be minded of.
Yes, certainly. The report, it provides an overview of risks during the first quarter. So that is basically set out within paragraph 2.1, and it shows that all of the risks were recorded, being reviewed at least once during the quarter. The corporate risk register is attached as an appendix. You can see a guide to the various headings within the report in paragraph 2.2. The corporate risks, for those who don't know, they're the most significant and overarching risks affecting the council as a whole. And these are the risks which are identified and overseen collectively by the corporate management team each month. and each of these risks has got a member of the corporate management team identified as a responsible officer. And this report now coincides each quarter with directors attending to present on their internal control environment, and that includes their corporate and directorate level risks, which is set out within paragraph 4 on page 8 of the report. Just to inform the committee as well, that in line with the annual governance statement and with observations made by this committee in the past, we did hold a workshop with a leadership team on the 25th of May, which was focused on the control measures within the risks, particularly in terms of trying to improve the quality of the control measures which are set out within the risk register. And we followed that up as well with a video which is based upon the workshop, and that video is accessible directly through the risk register to all responsible officers, and we've signposted responsible officers to that video. And what we're hoping now is that the control measures in the risk register will be reviewed and revised in accordance with the guidance that it offers. So the next stage for us really is to make sure that the learning from the workshop and the video is being put into practice by the responsible officers, and that we start to see the improvements in the quality of the control measures going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I think if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Somebody's clicked the button somewhere else, I think. Can I thank you, Richard, for continuing the work to develop and enhance the detail in the reports. I think it's fair to say I remain concerned with the control narrative, albeit the workshop's taking place and the video is there. Particularly around the control measures, and the explanation of what is deemed the control is not necessarily the case in many areas. But I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I think the committee will have the opportunity to challenge some of the control narrative when we see the individual directors attending the audit committee meeting. So it's important that that work continues to improve the level of the narrative in the report, so that where they describe a control, it is truly a control. And I hope that when Simon Coppings, the Chief Auditor, is auditing, he'd be minded of the committee's concern in checking the narrative of the control measures and testing the effectiveness of those control measures as well. So if there are no further comments, then perhaps we could move on. And again, thank you, Richard. I do appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you, Chair.
The next item is the Internal Control Environment 21-22 for the Education Department. And I believe Brian Rose and Helen Morgan-Rees are with us to go through that report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If you turn to page...
If I could interrupt, I've had my hand up for the previous item.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Rayner.
Thank you. I'd just like to make an observation on the risk on a page in Appendix A to Richard's very useful report. I wonder if presentationally it could be adjusted date-wise, because we have a number of pages where, for instance, tax evasion and new legislation, the dates of the information relate to either April or August of this year, and in other departments the latest risk date update is either 1919 or 1920, and then towards the end we have some departments, Sustainable Swansea, Emergency Planning, where there are no last updates, no risk response, merely a note that the projects have been completed. Now, I doubt those departments will have been mothballed, so I just wonder if we could have these adjusted so that we can see the situation across the council on a quarterly basis, perhaps, so that there is some greater clarity on where we are at each month, rather than referring back several months or in some cases years. So I don't know if Richard could advise on that.
Richard, can you come back in, please?
Yes, certainly. Just to clarify, on the report where you have the last update in relation to the current control measures, that illustrates when that particular control measure was last updated. So it may be that the risk itself, in terms of its likelihood and impact, which gives it the RAG status, it could be that that has been updated. But when you go through the control measures, you may find that there are some control measures which haven't been updated for some time. So we monitor this report on a monthly basis, and one of the things that that we monitor is the frequency in which the risks have been updated. So what we ask responsible officers to do as a minimum is to ensure that the likelihood and the impact of the risk is updated at least on a monthly basis, and that they review their control measures to ensure that the control measures are still current in terms of them being effective in controlling the risk. So that's just a brief summary of what the intention of it. What you also see on the risk report as well is the projected completion date. So this illustrates when the responsible officer expects that particular control measure to be put into effect and for it to be completed. So that's also reviewed on a monthly basis as well.
Is that okay, Councillor Rayner?
Thank you, that's very reassuring, but the report comes to the Governance Audit Committee. It would be useful if the honour page actually gave the date when it was last reviewed. I appreciate you're looking at it monthly, but I think it would be useful and of great help when we have to assure the Audit Office that we are confident that it has been done if we have dates written down. Thank you.
Councillor Rayner, I'd absolutely agree with you there, and if we could be minded that we've got the Education Department coming next and there's a risk register there, and maybe we can probe and ask the questions of those individuals presenting as to, you know, the very issue you've just raised, because Richard, I know, is reliant on the engagement by officers across the council to do the work, and the only way that, you know, we can sort of help and assist Richard is by bringing those directives to the Governance and Audit Committee. So it's important that we do ask the individuals when they do attend those very questions that you've raised. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Rayner. I've got Julie Davis's hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a general comment about the closed control measures, because we haven't got sight at the moment of the reason of them closing, and I think it would be quite useful if we could understand if the closed control measures are closed because they've been completed or because they're no longer relevant, or whether they've been superseded by another control measure. I don't know whether that's possible, Richard. Or whether you already have sight of that information.
Yes, we've already got sight of that within the risk register itself.
Okay.
If we wanted to include it in the report, that would require some additional development time from ICT, but we are aware of the reasons why risks are closed. That is recorded in the system.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no further hands up that I can see. Apologies yet again, Councillor Rayner, I didn't spot the hand up earlier on. And apologies to the Education Directorate as well, because I did introduce you and ask you to briefly give us a run through of your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So item 5, page 49 in your report pack, it gives, the main body of the report gives a broad overview of internal controls in the Education Directorate, and I guess part of it is explaining how we mitigate against risk and how we avoid actually having to put things on a risk register in the first place. So that gives you a very broad overview of governance arrangements in our directorate to make sure that we have key dialogues with our managers, with our officers on the ground to identify risks at the earliest opportunity and in relation to schools as well. So unless there are questions on the main body of the report, I'm guessing that your specific request is in relation to Appendix A on your report pack, starting on page 72, where the Directorate and corporate risks are listed there in terms of the Education Directorate. As Richard Rowlands pointed out, we have had training to improve our internal controls and the quality of what is written. And we have had an opportunity to look at our compliance around risk management to make sure it was pleasing that in the corporate management team in July that the Education Directorate was deemed to be fully compliant with the requirements from Richard Rowlands, other than 2 matters in relation to dates needing to be extended. So I'm happy to take questions on Appendix A or Appendix B, which focuses on the corporate risk in relation to education. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's a very comprehensive report, and I'm sure we have a number of members that will have questions. So if we can have any hands up for questions, please. Not seeing any hands at the moment. No, I can see them. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yes, it's only a query really. You're just looking at the terms of reference here, especially on the financial side. It keeps referring back to 2010-11 with figures in there. Are they relevant or?
Councillor Jones, can you tell me exactly which page you're referring to?
I hope I haven't got that right before. I'm working on 2 machines here. Page 66. 65.
65 and 66.
Yeah, I think it's part of the performance and financial monitoring guiding notes.
Yeah. Yes, it's they keep referring to figures back to 2010-11,
Yeah.
Achieving savings of 9.68 million. I just wondered what the relevance really was, referring back to something that's over 10 years old.
Okay, can I bring Brian Rose in to comment on why that is the case? Brian, I don't know if you're able to comment on that issue.
I'm just looking through, to be honest, trying to see where it's cropping up.
It starts on page 65.
Right. Yeah, but I'm not seeing any years in that part. Oh, hang on, I'm looking at, right, sorry, wrong 65. My fault.
Section 18 and 19.
Right, thank you.
Perhaps if I could come in to assist and chair. It does reference 2010-11, and Councillor Jones is quite right that it does look a bit long in the tooth, but to be fair to my education colleagues, they've included a summary of the agreement that was drafted on how the PFM process works, and that was extant in 10-11 and was referring to matters then. The underlying PFM process hasn't changed, so that's the reason why it looks irrelevant, and in one sense is irrelevant. It just happened to be that snapshot in time. But our basic PFM reporting process in terms of risks and budget monitoring hasn't ostensibly changed all the way through in the last decade, and I think that's what's causing the confusion that Councillor Jones has rightly raised. If that helps, and apologies for cutting in, Brian, but I thought I got there a bit quicker than yourself on the page because it's always difficult finding it in the committee papers.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. I must admit I did gather that really, but perhaps somebody I couldn't see the relevance of referring to figures that were perhaps 10 or 11 years old really. Figures really should be in there. So at the end of the day, because there are terms of reference, and why refer to one particular year's figures. So anyway, just a comment.
Yeah, that's fine.
Guidance notes, then maybe they need to be updated annually or biannually, and quite rightly so. Is there a need for the figures to go in, or just the guidance on process? And just park that with you, Ben. I can appreciate it's not significant priority with everything else going on, but it may be something that can be done when time permits.
That's fine, Chair. I mean, the reality, as you rightly say, is it's not a high priority, and the underlying process hasn't changed. I mean, I suppose with hindsight, it could have been redacted out those bits to avoid the confusion, but the broad principles still apply. The process hasn't changed, and I'm unlikely to sign up to doing it annually or biannually if the process hasn't changed. But the point of principle is accepting it will go on the to-do or the to-don't list when time allows with the other priorities. With your permission, Chair.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, I've got Julie Davis next.
Thank you, Chair. I understand from the previous audit committee that schools have opted out of the procurement SLA with the council. So I was wondering whether, because procurement is a specialist area, whether you have measures in place to manage the procurement risks, for example, from either sourcing or contract monitoring, because I don't see that identified as a risk in Appendix A.
Thanks, Julie. I'll bring Brian in to comment there, if you will, Brian.
Yeah. It's not quite as black and white in terms of schools. In terms of the SLA, schools still do have support advice in terms of procurement from the team, because that's a statutory responsibility that we have as an authority. The SLA was that did came in for as on a trial basis to provide targeted enhanced support specifically for schools, and then on review they felt that was not being provided effectively what they were paying for, so that was why that came to an end. So the advice is still there and the support. We do in training and in guidance advise schools in terms of and encourage them to go with corporate contracts and frameworks and so on, and of the benefits of that. So in a sense, that is how that is managed. I'm not sure I'm not certain about whether, we could consider whether that should be added as a specific risk, but as I say, we are taking measures there. There is a section in the report which which talks about the not just the training but also the procurement guide that we are currently, we have updated, and we are just getting it in line with council instructions and financial regulations, and then that will be available to schools as well.
Okay, thank you. And could I ask a second question of Simon, please? In the main body of the report, you mentioned schools causing financial concern and schools in deficit and deficit reduction programme. So I was wondering whether those are taken into account when you build your schools audit programme for the year.
Sorry, Julie, what pages were you referring to there in the report?
It's paragraph 1.3. I believe. I haven't got it up at the moment, but I'll try and pull it up now.
Yeah, ordinarily, Julie, as part of the individual school audits, we would look at the budget setting process as part of the standard audit programme, but we have moved this year and last year to thematic reviews because of access issues with the schools. So ordinarily we would look at the budget setting, but you also have to bear in mind that they've got PSOs in place as well to help support budget setting and budget monitoring. Yeah. So ordinarily that would form part of our standard testing, but not for the thematics for the current and previous year, Julie.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Chair, if I may also come in by way of context, whilst what is written there is absolutely correct, obviously our schools are in a very strong financial position in terms of their levels of overall accumulated reserves, and we measure and test their financial position in terms of their ability to set a balanced budget in the following year, including the use of those reserves. So in Swansea context, we may probably only have one primary in that position at the moment, if I recall. My colleagues may correct me, but certainly we're in a very strong position. That's not to overstate the position, because as you've heard at Outturn and at Council, there are special reasons why reserves have swollen so significantly and substantially but clearly in the current audit year and in the next couple of audit years, those level of reserves are going to mean there's going to be hardly any schools that fall into that financial difficulty category for prioritisation as causing concern on financial grounds, would be my view. I presume my education colleagues would concur with that.
Yeah, if I could just, could build on that just a little bit, just to agree that is the case, and we do continue to encourage our schools to effectively plan over more than one financial year, and the flexibility they have with their accumulated reserves allow them to do that. So our indicative school budget shares that we provide to our schools give them a very good basis to which to look over more than 1 year, particularly the impact of projected trends and movements in pupil numbers, which is the largest single factor affecting the school's budget share in future years. So as I say, we encourage them to utilise the flexibility that their reserves provides to them.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Black.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just refer to Appendix A and the school cloud Oracle access, which I noticed has been in the red for the whole of this year so far. Is that specifically down to the pandemic preventing causing problems in terms of rollout, or are there other issues around this particular rollout programme?
If I can respond to Councillor Black's question, yes, indeed, we have had other considerations that have taken priority, and we've had to tolerate that risk. And as you can see, month upon month, then you can see the actual RAG status for that risk not changing. I am pleased to say that we are working on alternatives. Currently, we've met with potential suppliers to come up with a solution last week to ensure that we potentially have an alternative to SIMS and that we can sort this issue out going forward. So we are very much in the treat zone going forward to make sure that we've got procurement really of potential new supplier to transfer education systems that were on SIMS to a better system. So that's in hand. But you're right, Councillor Black, in pointing out that essentially other matters have taken priority and we've just had to tolerate the risk.
Councillor Jennifer Rayner.
Thank you. I think looking at education and risk management highlights this quite unusual position within the council of the fact that the delegated budget gives schools an enormous autonomy, and much of the responsibility lies with each individual school and governing body. And as Julie has said, things like procurement, there are high risks, especially as the figure that schools can spend has gone up from £5,000 to £10,000. And I do wonder whether or not we should add to the risk register a note about training of school governors. There is some statutory requirement, for instance, when you first become a governor, as a new governor, for safeguarding and for some of the more complex disciplinary issues. But at the present stage, and I stand to be corrected, I'm not sure it's a statutory requirement for governors to have undergone some of the financial training which is on offer. And I think it would be useful to know if we have any governing bodies who are operating without training on financial matters, given the enormous autonomy they have. As has been remarked, the large sums that have come in and now reside in their reserves, and also the increase in local spend. So just flagging that as a question. I don't know if Helen or Brian would like to come back. The training of school governors is essential here for a large amount of the education spend.
Yeah, I've come back initially, and then Brian may want to complement my comments. But yes, the training, the systematic training of schools and governors is absolutely key. And we recognise in education that the training of schools is a matter that needs consideration in the autumn term, this autumn term. So we will be, I think, at the end of this month, ensuring that our school colleagues, our school leaders, are very much on the same page when it comes to financial matters in schools. And we will consider how that then plays out into the realms of training governors. But as you rightly point out, Councillor Rayner, there are a range of responsibilities and powers that governing bodies have, and a lot of the risk does lie within that school and governor territory rather than the central team in education. So it's very important that we empower governors and train them systematically to be able to deal with those risks and responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just add to that. I would totally agree with that. And as one of the people that carries out the training of governors, we have done that level best over recent years, trying different times and approaches to sort of make that more as available as it possibly can, and to encourage as many governors to take on board that offer of that training. We've got a different opportunity, I suppose, now doing it as we've been doing it most recently remotely, and that sort of opens it up a little bit more, and to have more frequent sessions. So we have been offering that training more frequently over the last year or so. So as I say, we are doing our best to sort of spread that message, and as Helen says, through the school budget forum and through the other different working groups with our head teacher colleagues, we always stress consistently the importance of all of these matters, and the support and the advice and the training that is available.
Thank you. Can I bring Councillor Jeff Jones back in, please?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Jennifer Rayner's comments there. You know, it's not mandatory, and I think it would be useful. And what Brian has actually said, that you know, the offer would be, shall we say, more frequent. I think would help anyway for people to be able to attend. But my question really, again, Appendix A, just a question how they actually get to, shall we say, an amber state or a red state or whatever. It's the pupil attainment and achievement. Now, you've got some schools where, shall we say, there's high achievement pupils, and there's other schools that are perhaps not so high and so on. So how is it calculated? How do you actually end up with an amber qualification? You know, do you take some of the good and some of the bad and actually get to an amber, which is shall we say, a safe you know, record perhaps of, you know, what's actually going on? How is that actually computed with regards to all the schools we've got?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Just in response, so you're referring to the risk on page 75, risk identified as 94.
75.
Yes, page 75. So in respect of that risk, obviously pupil attainment and achievement, we have to take a broad, high-level view of this risk, because this is our core purpose in education. So it is very much at a high kind of macro level that we consider this risk. And obviously the disruption to education because of COVID makes that a very live issue and a very live risk, but it was there pre-COVID as well, because obviously we pride ourselves in Swansea on having attainment and achievement levels that are above national levels historically before COVID, and obviously we want to maintain that position. However, it's been really difficult to measure the high-level main indicators for performance of pupils in respect of their attainment because of the changes in exam systems and also the changes because of COVID. So we would always see this as a risk in education, almost, because it's our core purpose. So we are always mitigating against the support and challenge that we need to provide really to our schools to make sure that they maintain those high standards through high quality of teaching and learning. So it's not as if we want to keep the risk there just for the sake of it, but I think there's a risk that if we don't keep it there, then we lose sight of our core purpose in education. But as you can see, some of the control measures there were very much in recent times in relation to COVID matters and the acute disruption to education, that we had to have specific control measures and very much tailored control measures to undertake our work in terms of monitoring our schools. But it is, to answer your question simply, Councillor Jones, a very high level view of achievement rather than at school level.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for raising that, Councillor Jones. But it was a question I was going to raise, and particularly that example where it's got current control measures. I'm not sure the control measures are actually control measures that will mitigate the risk of the description. And again, picking up Councillor Rayner's point around the last update of the dates, there is nothing on that page, you know, of the last update being in 2021. So I think, you know, that's the challenge for the members of this committee is, you know, being confident that when you talk about, you know, if pupils don't receive very good education, want to achieve the right qualification, what exactly are you doing to stop that happening? So I won't ask you to respond to that, but it's something I think needs to be more specific and explained in more detail in the control measure narrative. And that's something I'd like Simon Cocking through the internal audit process to help promote some further understanding to complement the training and the video that Richard Rosens has raised previously. Because this is a very important part of the Audit Committee's agenda. I've got Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Coming back to procurement, as you know, this is something I regularly have been sort of banging the drum over, because when we get reports in from Simon's team, from schools, usually the top of the tree is usually the issue around how schools are using procurement. And subsequently, where we've had some head teachers come in and speak to us, it is important, because you know that the governors do understand what the procedures are, especially dealing with the funds of the school. And this is why I've always asked if there's a possibility that we could have a policy on this area of to brought forward, so that schools could have a subcommittee, a procurement subcommittee that will obviously, they know that they abide in and by the terms of reference as well, so they know exactly how the policy should be implemented. But I know it's been mentioned. I don't know how far we are in actually moving forward with that. But I think that would be definitely a big advantage for school governors.
Okay, can Brian or Helen respond to that?
Yeah, if I may, please, Chair. We have just at the moment we've agreed with our head teacher representatives that there will be nominated head teachers who are going to meet with Chris Williams and procurement colleagues, involving ourselves as well, to specifically consider the support and other needs that schools have, and how we can take this forward to build on what is already in place there. So hopefully that will, you know, we would trust that will make quite a difference and further strengthen what is already there. You're quite right. Procurement is the common, or probably is the most common sort of finding from audits. But the overall context of that is our controls and our overall control framework within our schools. You know, is sound and is fairly positive in that regard. So I hope that's sort of encouraging anyway.
Thank you. Simon Cockins, do you want to comment?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mike. I just wanted to highlight the fact that we are in the process of updating the procurement guide for schools. And I think there was talk of having refresher training once that was finalised. So I just wondered if Brian can maybe give us an update on where we're at with that guide and any intention for training, because that would help a lot for governors in terms of procurement procedures and guidance. I know it's a fairly new document, but I think there are obviously changes in staffing across the school since the last training was completed. So I think it would be useful to have a refresher on that.
Yeah, I did mention, Chair, a little earlier the fact that the procurement guide has been drafted and updated, so that is available in terms of the Education Directorate put into that. The reason we still, it's not quite at the point where we can issue it, is because the references within that guide to accounting instructions and so on have got to be consistently saying the same things, and there are still some things which we need to ensure are consistent between the documents that are referred to in the guide and the updated guide itself. So it's always a bit of a tricky one, this. Do you issue it early, warts and all, as a draft almost, to have the dialogue with schools as soon as possible, or do you wait until everything is, you know, every I dotted and T crossed before you sort of issue it? And that's basically the point where we are at. And you're absolutely right. It's an ideal opportunity then to have kind of refresher sort of training sessions, further push with schools. As Helena mentioned earlier, we've got a cross-phase heads meeting where we will be pressing these matters again with them, as we do regularly.
You okay with that?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Sharon.
Councillor Jeff Jones, is your hand up from?
Yeah, I'll take it through now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Leslie Walton.
Thanks, Chair. Going back to governor training, I think, bear in mind that all councillors had hundreds of emails coming through, and sometimes when you get one that gives you the options, you tend to think, oh, I'll look at that later. And one of the things I've noticed, and I might be wrong, you might have changed this, is you tend to list the training options available and then at some point say, oh, this will be appropriate for people on that committee or the whole governing body, etc., etc. I was wondering if perhaps you could group it the other way round, so that, for instance, if I was on, for instance, finance committee, then I'd get to a group of training that says these are the ones that are appropriate if you're on the finance committee. I don't know if that's a possibility, and as I say, I might have got this wrong, but thanks.
Chair, if I can respond to Councillor Walton, yes, just to say we are always listening to feedback, and anything we can do to improve the offer around governor training, we'll listen to that feedback, and that's a very pertinent point. Thank you.
Chair, I think you're muted again.
Thank you, Sam. I don't know what's happening with the mute button. Julie, is your legacy hand or?
No, I just wanted to ask another question about procurement, please. As different support systems are being put in place for procurement, can you ensure that all procurement-related costs are taken into account, not just the cost of goods and services, when determining whether schools are obtaining best value?
Helen or Brian, do you want to respond?
Brian, do you want to come in on that point?
I've got to be honest, I struggled to hear the fully because it kept breaking up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, what I wanted to ensure was that as different support systems are being put in place for procurement, as we've already discussed, that all procurement related costs are taken into account, not just the cost of the individual goods and services when determining whether schools are obtaining best value.
Right. I mean, we always stress to schools the fact that sometimes if they're considering I mean, this relates particularly with SLAs, I guess, in a way, in my mind, because a school can consider, oh golly, that's a bit pricey. Surely I can do better myself if I manage that directly myself. But we always encourage schools to make sure they are fully reflecting their own time and input into a process or an area as well. So they may not want, they may consider, oh well, I don't want to pay for that SLA support specifically, to help me in this particular matter. But if it's going to mean the head teacher devotes days and days of their time, then they should be costing that in. And so we would always encourage that is fully reflected, so that you're comparing like with like. Otherwise, they're not really making an informed, proper choice. And you've got to also consider the risks involved as well, where you draw in the support of another team within the council. You can be assured that all those elements are being done in a proper way, and the linkages are there, etc. And so that the risks are managed for delivering something within a school. I'm clearly, if it were like a refurbishment of a classroom or a structural, a maintenance type sort of work or whatever. I don't know. Does that sort of, is that the sort of point you were getting to?
It is what I was getting at. Yes, that perhaps schools could take the cost of a good or service and think that they are saving money. But if you take head teacher's time or procurement specialist time into account, there isn't actually any difference, or the cost might actually be more to the school. So I wanted some assurance that is being taken account of.
Yeah. Well, we do say we do press those points and encourage schools along that vein. So we do try to reinforce those points. And you're absolutely right. There are short-term savings that can be made, but they don't make no sense longer term, because it builds up issues, well, particularly maintenance, day-to-day maintenance, which then will come back and fall on the school and potentially also on us. So, as I say, we are very precious about reinforcing those messages, particularly to schools.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands up there, but just to reflect on some of the questions and the comments made. I mean, I would absolutely concur with Councillor Rayner's comments about the enormous autonomy that the schools have, and also the importance of appropriate training for all governors to ensure that there are robust governance arrangements operating. And then coupled with that, we need to see and have assurance that there will be robust procedures written up covering procurement, which we've been informed of on many times through meetings and the internal audit work, of non-compliance with contract procedures, training around the unofficial funds, and all those areas where our chief auditor have raised concern and criticism over a number of schools. It's not isolated to one, it's across more than one. So it's important that that work comes to an end. I have got one question, and it's in paragraph 11.4. You make reference to the new regional partnership arrangement and governance risk management, and the move to a new regional model and footprint for September 2021. Can you confirm if that's now operational? And if so, Simon, will you be auditing that in the future? So Helen, can you confirm if it's operational, please?
What I can confirm, Chair, is that we have entered into an informal partnership with two other councils, and the formal partnership will be in place by the 1st of December 2021. And that date is significant because of the requirement of each constituent council within the partnership to formally approve in council the new legal agreement. So we are currently in a state of informal partnership with existing governance arrangements that belonged to the old consortium, ERO. They are being utilised currently until we enter into the new legal agreement. Now, the new legal agreement clearly states out what the governance arrangements are, including officers and elected members. So there is a clear governance structure within a schedule itemised in detail within the new legal agreement, and that legal agreement is reaching its final draft stage and is due to go to Swansea Council in November.
Okay, thank you for that. And Simon, will you be?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. I'm happy to work with Helen on the consultation in November, December time, possibly with a view to look at this in next year's plan, if that's okay, Helen. So if you can pick that up as part of the consultation, that would be fine.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if it can be reviewed, just to make sure that the governance arrangements are effective as well as working. Unless there are any more questions, I don't think I've got any more, but just bear with me one sec.
Chair, do you mind if I come back on the point of audit in terms of governance arrangements? Obviously, the joint committee of the new partnership will consider internal audits and external audits of the new partnership as well as any other subsequent audit requirements from Swansea Council. So there are 3 tiers, so to speak, of audit of governance arrangements potentially in the new partnership.
Okay. Well, I hope that Richard Rowlands will reflect as necessary any risks surrounding the new arrangements in the short term now. If I can bring that item to a close, I've not seen any more hands up. Can I thank you both, Brian and Helen, for the comprehensive report, and if you can take away the comments made by members of the Audit Committee to improve and to strengthen the arrangements as we move forward. And hopefully we'll have some clean audit reports coming through once the training and the procedures and everything else is panning out. But thank you again both, I appreciate your input.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
That runs for information, so we can move on to the update report of the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee. Martin Nichols.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly give a little bit of an overview. I'm conscious of time and your packed agenda. The report just outlines really the progress that's been taking place over the last few months. Attached to that is the report that was previously taken to Cabinet back in May. Just draw attention to a couple of key points. In that previous May report, we indicated the Welsh Government had sought bids from the regions for funding towards the transitional arrangements for setting up the CJCs. The South West Wales region submitted that bid and that was successful, and we've been awarded 250,000, which is funding the transitional period, transitional work for the next few months up until it's formally constituted. The South West Wales region is made up by the 4 local authorities plus the 2 national parks within our region, but the national parks powers are effectively mandated and limited to the planning function, although it will be a future decision of the CJC as to whether or not they wish to extend those activities across any of the other streams. Indications are from the leaders' meetings currently that the initial setting up of the CJC will include the 3 mandated functions under the legislation, which is strategic development, the regional transport planning, and the economic well-being aspects. That will effectively be the day one. There is an alignment, of course, to the existing city deal activities, but at the moment, the likelihood is that we will twin track the city deal programme and governance and the CJC programme and governance, because they are 2 separate pieces of legislation. And then over a period of time, consideration will be given about where practical and where possible, whether to merge those. But they will all be joined up and obviously covered by the same individuals across the organisations. Section 2 outlines some of the key milestones, some of the planned activities that will be taking place over the next few months in what I think it's safe to say is a very compressed timescale since the legislation was passed to enable the CJC to set its budget by January 2022 and to formally constitute the remaining activities by June 2022. So as you'll see, there's quite a lot of references in there to the legal and the governance arrangements that need to be put in place over the next few months, and also then the financial implications and how those are tackled also within the next few months. The CJC is currently not formally constituted. It's effectively meeting in a sort of quasi-shadow form, but decisions will be made over the next month or two about when to formally constitute it, and that will have to be prior to the budget being set in January. Rob Stewart, the leader of Swansea Council, is the chair currently of the Shadow CJC, and I know he's present, and I'm sure he'll be happy to take any questions in that regard as well. Section 3 just outlines the governance and audit committee requirements, and that is one that's effectively work in progress, and that is intended to be finalised over the next couple of months. But I would expect that to be operating similarly to the way in which the City Deal regional arrangements work. But again, that's not been formally decided or formally determined. And the intention would be is for a further report to be prepared on that back to Cabinet later on this year, along with some of the other key deliverables that are referred to within the report. That's all I was going to say by way of introduction, Chair. Happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much. That's very informative, Peter. Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. First of all, there seems to be a lot more work have been done on the Governance and Audit Subcommittee for this CJC than actually on scrutiny itself. So I'm not clear exactly what the scrutiny arrangements are going to be for the work which is undertaken by this Joint Committee, especially given the fact that the Joint Committee is a corporate body in its own right and therefore independent of the constituent bodies which form it. So I'd be quite interested in how much work is being done on that scrutiny aspect. My second question is in terms of funding, what funding arrangements are in place once this transitional money is used up in terms of the day-to-day operation of this body and promotion of any of its projects? Obviously grant funding will be applied for many of the projects it does, but in terms of the funding of some of the things which it wants to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I may ask for a bit of input from Tracy, I think, who was in the room there on the first question. But my understanding is, effectively, we really are in the very early days of both audit and governance and scrutiny in terms of those arrangements. They have not yet been discussed in detail in the Shadow CJC. It is one of the key activities that needs to take place over the next couple of months. So I think they're probably in a similar place. And really there needs to be progress on that over the next couple of months, as there will be with many of the other items listed. In terms of the financial arrangements, as I understand it, Welsh Government have only committed to fund transitional arrangements for this year. Any financing that is required for subsequent years, and finance colleagues, Ben Smith and others, are currently working on developing a draft budget for the CJC that would be implemented for the next financial year, and the cost of that would be applied by way, I believe I got the terminology right, by way of a levy against council tax in the individual constituent authorities, and by way of a charge against the two national parks who will be party to the CJC. So the reality is those costs are likely to include the effectively managing the CJC, so any cost directly associated with employed staff, any costs associated with directly delivering the work streams. Clearly, one of the opportunities that the CJCs are exploring is where it can attract additional investment and funding. Again, that's one of the things that's being progressed over the next few months. If I'm being honest, the sort of update is a little bit earlier than we would have liked, but we're happy to present as the committee with this update. But I think things will be far more progressed by the time I think we do to come back again early in the new year. I believe we're scheduled to come back to a session in January.
So this levy would be similar to the Fire Authority, for example. I know Ben's put his hand up.
I'll leave Ben answer that one. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
First of all, can we invite Tracy to comment?
Yes, Councillor Black, just in relation to the scrutiny concerns that you had, legal officers are actually working on scrutiny arrangements and working on a briefing paper to put before the chief execs and the leaders of the CJC. The regulations do provide specifically in relation to governance and audit that the CJC must set up a governance and audit committee. In relation to scrutiny, all they simply say at the moment is that the CJC must arrange for appropriate scrutiny arrangements to be put in place. Similarly, actually, with the Standards Committee, the councillors that will sit on the CJC will be subject to their own standards regime, so we will also need to look at a Standards Committee dealing with any code of conduct breaches, etc. So we are working on that at the moment, Councillor Black, and we are in the midst of preparing a briefing paper. There are 4 monitoring officers working on this together with a whole host of legal officers as well.
Thank you. And can I invite Ben in, please? Comment on the finance matters.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Martin has admirably explained it, and Councillor Black has also interpreted correctly. Effectively, it's a theoretically unlimited levy on the constituent authorities, working exactly the same way as the 2 levies we have for the Port Health Authority and the Fire Authority. But until the body corporate exists and determines an operating budget, there is no budget and therefore no levy and no basis for determining, which is why Mr Nichols has referred to the very compressed timescale as an element of chicken and egg. But as it both he and Councillor Black have indicated that the body corporate, when it exists, is able to access grants and other matters in the same way that the Fire Authority and the Port Health Authority are able to. So it's the residual running costs which ultimately fall to the constituent bodies, and potentially an element to the National Parks Authorities, which themselves levy off constituent authorities. But that's exactly how it's intended to work. But a very compressed timescale in terms of the early setup. And as Mr Nichols has said, there is at the moment no indication of any grant funding beyond the current setup year.
Thank you, Ben. I've got one hand up, Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's Martin, Mr Nichols, really. Yeah, in regards to the Corporate Joint Committee partnership working, will we have positivity on this and not negatively, because of perhaps of seeing City and Swansea as the big brother? Can we have a show so that everybody knows that everybody is equal? Because there were issues with this when we had unitary authority in 1995, 96, when merger of councils come together. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, look, all I can say is my experience over the last 6 months since we've been working on this is one of probably the best example of collaboration I've seen working as a region. I think the City Deal activities over the last 3 to 4 years has really improved relationships and got us to a place where, you know, both at chief executive level and at leader level, there is a consensus in terms of how all of the authorities are moving forward. The report that was attached to this report, which was taken out of Cabinet back in May, was a report that was developed jointly across the region by monitoring officers and has been approved by all 4 constituent authorities anyway. So all 4 authorities have signed up to the same base principles, and all 4 authorities are working together to deliver them. As well as the leaders' meetings, effectively the chief executives, the monitoring officers, Section 151 officers, and the directors with responsibility for those mandated functions have been meeting on a fortnightly basis for the last 3 to 4 months. And there is no sign that commitment is in any way waning. Also, one of the things that's been explored at the moment, which is yet to be finalised, but the signs are encouraging, is the activities are likely to be shared out pretty equally as far as is possible across the 4 authorities in terms of who leads on which activity and which function. So that's yet to be formally determined by the CJC, but the reality is the signs are very encouraging that each local authority is prepared to pull its own weight in relation to delivering the combined CJC activities.
Thank you. That's good to hear. The leader has got his hand up, so can I invite you in, Rob?
Yeah, Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, Martin's covered the first point I was going to make, which is, the relationship is a good one. I think as Martin said, the city deal arrangements have bedded in and have helped us to build relationships across the region, which are reinforced now with the establishment of CJC. So that's been a bonus for us. But it doesn't take away the complexity of the things that we're having to consider here in terms of the new structures, and as Martin has said, how we ensure the leadership is correct in terms of each of those various streams, and then obviously the support mechanisms and the other mechanisms that need to be in place, including scrutiny, audit, and other stuff. So we're not at the point yet where we can give you full clarity on that, but my aim, along with other leaders, is as soon as we have something that is something we can present to everybody, obviously we want to make sure it goes to elected members first for their consideration and for their comment, and that is perfectly right that should happen. The other thing I would say, as a leader, I'm sure the other leaders would say the same if they were here. These are new obligations and new arrangements that have been brought in by Welsh Government, and we would be hoping that Welsh Government, even though they haven't committed funding at this point, will be providing some funding into this new mechanism as we go forward, because the burden of running these new structures shouldn't just fall to local authorities to fund.
Thank you. Thank you. And Councillor Jennifer Rayner.
Thank you. And can I thank Martin for bringing this paper forward? Clearly a lot of work has gone into play in bringing together a lot of activities which have been happening on a regional basis anyway. The timing is, shall we say, interesting in that we're establishing certain things January onwards next year. But in May there is an election which may or may not have an impact. Will the JCC, sorry, I've lost its title now, the Joint Committee have the same responsibilities in terms of HERDA as ordinary councils have?
The leader, do you want to respond on that one? You're on mute.
I'll leave the pre-election period question to Tracy, but I assume, given that elected representatives are involved, then yes, those would probably apply. What I would say to Councillor Rayner, though, is that it was a deliberate decision to move more quickly in terms of the setup of the CJCs, because, as you say, there is a potential for much change during the election crossover, and of course that could mean that other considerations are taken up by new councils coming in. So we wanted to get a basis and a stable footprint established before the elections take place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Tracy?
Yes, Councillor Rayner, I agree with Councillor Stewart. Albeit the CJC is a separate legal entity, it will be comprised of local councillors who will be participating in the election, no doubt, and they will be subject to the normal pre-election period rules.
Thank you. I've not seen any more hands up, so if you can bring this report to a close. Can I thank you, Martin, for the update, and we look forward to receiving the update in January, as you mentioned. And good luck, and hopefully the relations will continue to grow. Thank you. If we can move on, because that's for information, that report. The next item on the agenda is the absence management audit report. I believe we've got Sean and Adrian with us today.
Morning, Chair. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
If it's okay with everyone, I'm having some technical issues throughout the morning, so I leave my camera off. It seems to work better with the camera off.
Okay.
So this was the first audit for absence management. We had 5 recommendations, and I can confirm that we've implemented 4 of them. There is one relating to the flexi system, and I'll come on to that a little bit later in my update. At this point, I would like to highlight that managers are responsible for recording and updating all sicknesses and associated information in the system. So the service centre monitors that system. It also provides training relating to the system. And we also issue monthly reports across the authority on all sicknesses. And we also provide information relating to return to work interviews and record of action meetings, what's been undertaken and what is currently outstanding. So as I mentioned, we've implemented the majority of the recommendations, and in the main, they related to sending annual reminders to managers around the mandatory training and updating the system in a timely manner. So what we've done is we've changed the narrative on our monthly emails when we issue those said reports. We've provided signposting for training, and we've provided additional narrative around the importance of updating the system in that timely manner. This does seem to be working because we've had some positive feedback from some of our users asking for additional information around training and just some general queries. So I think the message is filtering through. We've also issued a communication to all heads of service, 3rd and 4th tier managers. I provided details of the recommendations from the audit report and again reiterated the importance of updating the system in a timely manner following the policy and the mandatory training. The last recommendation related to Interflex, and we have a large number of unauthorised absences. This is the Flexi system. When we've done a demand analysis on this, in the main, these unauthorised absences, they do not relate to sickness cases. They can be missed clock-ins, they can be leave. So we didn't believe at this time it's cost effective to liaise with our third-party provider. And what we'd like to do in the future is look more towards Oracle Fusion. So in the pack, we've included a trend analysis that covers a 3-year period using Q1 data. So you can see from that trend analysis that there has been a significant increase in the number of return to work interviews that are being recorded in our Oracle EBS system. But there's also been a decrease in the overall number of sickness cases that have required a record of action meeting. But again, a marked improvement in those meetings being recorded in Oracle. As the committee may be aware, we're also in the process of implementing Oracle Fusion. Following this, all managers will have access to a real-time dashboard. So at any given time, they can log into the system, see who's off within their area, how long they've been off, any outstanding record of actions, any outstanding return to works, instead of waiting for the monthly reports to be issued from ourselves. What Fusion will also give us is an additional benefit of the learning model. It'll all be held in one place. So once we go live, all managers will receive reminders to undertake all mandatory training, including absence management. Once that information is held in the system, it will then automatically produce reminders as and when the refresher training needs to be taken place again. I'm also aware in Adrian's area, you've secured additional resource in social services, place and education. I'm not sure, Adrian, if you've got anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Yes, on that particular point, yes, you're right. We have been able to source additional resource for each of those directorates. First of all, on a sort of pilot basis, the pilots have been so well received, particularly in social services at this stage, because they were the first directorate to enter into this arrangement, that they're looking to make that a permanent arrangement, and the support that has been given there is ensuring compliance by managers in terms of the policy, but also to be, should we say, more proactive in identifying ways in which we can get staff to return back to work quicker, and also to avoid them going off sick in the first place. So yeah, there's a whole range of sort of proactive measures that those additional officers will be providing to support those particular directorates where sickness levels are particularly high or have been high.
Okay, that's my update finished. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Right, sorry, something's happening with the mic being muted all the time. Oh, there are some questions. Okay, Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, it looks like a very good piece of work you've actually done, and it'll track things a lot better, shall we say, in the future. But at the present time, or shall we say, since COVID actually started, figures will be skewed surely with regards to. I would have thought people would have taken less sickness at the present time. So really, with regards to any return to work or back, interviews and so on, they wouldn't be a true record, especially perhaps over the last year and a half. Can you comment?
Yeah, that could very well be the case. We didn't see as many COVID recorded in the system last year, and then we saw a surge this year. But yes, I would agree, yeah, with us working from home and the restrictions.
Thank you. Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a point really on process of the policy. When obviously managers are interviewing staff coming back and they need to, perhaps want to further measures as a consequence of the interview, surely to make sure of transparency and make sure the correct procedures, the HR officer should be in assistance with the person who's been called for interview, along with a trade union representative, so that the HR can ensure that the proper procedures are carried out under the interview process. I gather that usually should actually be the procedure. If you can confirm that, please.
Adrian, can I ask you to make comment on that, as it's more policy related?
Yes, I mean, the HR advisors are, of course, always there to support managers and advise managers on individual cases. There simply isn't the resource to sit in on every stage of the process, and as Sean mentioned right at the start of the presentation, there is a responsibility on managers to undertake that role. All managers are required to attend training to support them in understanding and following the process. But certainly where there is a need for support and advice, then the HR advisors will be there to support.
And along with the trade union representative for the person being interviewed.
If an individual needs support from their trade union representative, then of course they are there to they have the opportunity to contact their trade union representative for that support.
Yeah, why I asked the question, Chair, was sometimes managers might not always understand what the procedure is and might interpret them in a different way.
Okay. I've got Councillor Leslie Bolton's hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Not a question, just a comment. Thank you very much for this report. I'm very pleased to see that you've took all our concerns on board and look like you're going down the right route. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. If there are no questions, Simon Hawkins.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just an update really for members. We're planning to do the follow-up of this review by the end of September. So the outcome of that follow-up then will be reported in the Q2 update report, which is due in November, just to give you a better picture of where we're at in terms of actually testing compliance. We are intending to get it done by the end of the month, so we'll report back in due course.
Thank you, Simon. I look forward to that. And I agree, it looks as if things are going the right way. I have had a conversation with Sean Williams regarding the number of absence days, because we did ask for that to be included in the report in the audit tracker. And Sean's confirmed that between April and August 21, there were 35,881 absence days. I asked if she'd give me a percentage calculation of that, put it into context, and that came out at 5.96%, which in the present situation with COVID, I've got no real alarms, although it's higher than we'd like. But I think in the present day, it doesn't seem hugely out of order. So I just mentioned that for the purposes of the minutes and for the completion of what was needed in the audit tracker. So I don't know if anybody's got comments on that, those numbers. Sean, can you confirm those numbers I quoted are correct, please?
Yeah, they're correct. Yeah, they're correct. And what I'm doing is pulling some data over the same period that the trend analysis was based on.
Thank you for that. This report is for information as well. Now, I'm minded we've had very regular updates on the report from the absence management, recognising the figures and the progress that's being made. I'm just wondering if maybe in February we could have just a snapshot update as to whether we're on track with the improvement trajectory. I'm just minded Simon Hawkins is going to present an update audit report, and maybe that we can delay that February update again, but if we can provisionally put for a further update in February, which gives you a little more breathing space, Sean.
Lovely, thank you, Chair.
Is that satisfactory?
Yeah, absolutely, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, can I thank you once again? I know it's a huge amount of effort you put into this, both Adrian, Sean and Michelle, who I've spotted in the picture as well. Okay then, if we can move on to the next report, which is the accounts receivable update, and we've got Sean and Michelle for that one as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm pretty much going to hand over to Michelle to go through the update report, but what I would like to acknowledge is the excellent work that has been and continues to be made within the team under Michelle's guidance and leadership. We've had new members of staff and they've gelled very well, and we can see that progress is being made. If it's okay, Michelle, is it okay to hand over to you?
Thank you, Shan. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. It's quite a short report that I've put in. I'll just give a little bit of context for that and just briefly touch on the highlighted points for this report. It's the accounts receivable report, so it's based on unpaid invoices and debt recovery. The main issues that have been reported back to the committee are based on the escalation of unpaid debt to legal, and then the backlog of invoices that are on the system, on the receivables Oracle system. So this particular report focuses on the progress of that backlog between June, when we last reported, to August, which is when the snapshot was taken. What we're seeing is that there are small incremental improvements each time we report back. But obviously these are large areas of work that we are referring to, and the projection is that this slow rate of improvement will continue for the foreseeable. And there is no quick fix for this particular area of work. And without doubling the resource or writing all the invoices off, we're just going to see this continued improvement should everything remain as is. So just to refer to the main highlights in the report, I've just put some statistics in to illustrate the focus and improvements that we have been able to achieve. We are continuing to hold the debt recovery activities meetings, where we are regularly reviewing the priorities and strategies that we have in place, and we switch focus across all of the debt areas to make sure that everything is progressed as soon as we possibly can. I've put in some stats about outstanding age debt, and that shows what is outstanding that's over 1 year old in terms of the age of the invoice. That does include invoices that are awaiting write-off, and also ones which could be on long-term repayment plans. It's everything in that figure. What we can illustrate is that if you take a snapshot from the same month over the last 3 years, which I've done for August year, you can see a continuous reduction in that over 1 year category. So that shows that there is a consistent reduction year on year. We, as part of the debt recovery activity meetings, we track what successes we have with the tracked recovery. I mean, recovery happens all the time as part of all of our activities, but we focus on particular areas with the DRA meetings, and that's what is illustrated in point B there with the targeted debt recovery actions from June to August. So what we achieved there was, out of 50 invoices that were tracked, there were just under 64% were paid in full, with only 22% remaining, and the rest were on various other different progressions. In terms of monetary value, it was 1.2 million in total for the 50 invoices, and 900,000 was recovered, paid in full. So it gives you a flavour there of the effectiveness of that piece of work. Then just quickly, we've got a fresh write-off list. We do that biannually now. That makes sure that invoices that are on awaiting write-off, that have had approval, are closed off on the system. So that work is currently going on this time of year. And we also track what invoices we refer to legal, and we've made some significant improvements here. We are continuing to make sure that invoices are progressed, and we've, in the space of June to August, we've referred another 22 invoices for 42,000 to the legal debt recovery team. And we've also been focusing on the invoices that have been on the refer to legal status for more than 1 year, and we've managed to get a 60% reduction, or almost a 60% reduction on those, to make sure that everything is up to date on the system there. And it's not highlighted in this summary report, but it is one of the action points in our internal audit report, to make sure that that reconciliation takes place and is completed. Again, another large area of work. So the recommendation is that we continue, obviously, with this work, and that we will continue to report to CMT for monitoring purposes.
Chair, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, the speaker's clicking off on mute again. Councillor Leslie Walton.
Thanks, Chair. On the table, targeted debt recovery, you've got remaining unpaid 11 invoices. Can you explain what does that mean, and is that getting better? I mean, hopefully that number's reducing, but you're able to explain it better.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That just means they are unpaid at the point that this snapshot of debt was taken. They will continue to be monitored because they're part of that targeted debt recovery action. And we will make sure that they are progressed to their fullest, to the end point for those invoices. So whether that would be a payment received, a negotiation of a repayment plan, or they go on to write off. Or sometimes we find that there are issues with the invoice and they end up needing to be reduced or cancelled. So it'll be either of those options, but we will make sure that they are progressed to the end point.
Thanks.
Thank you. Julie Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Michelle and Sean. I know that you're doing a heck of a lot of work in this area. What I wanted to ask was whether you do any root cause analysis of the debts, where either the debts that are referred to legal or the long outstanding debts, to understand the reasons. For example, whether it is departments not providing you with sufficient information, or whether whether credit shouldn't have been allowed in the first place.
In terms of invoices, before we refer to legal, we vet everything on that particular debt. So that involves the position with the of circumstances of the customer, as well as the details of the debt outstanding itself. So all of that will be checked and reviewed before we refer to legal. We also have to obtain evidence of the debt from the service department and provide that to the legal department before we can refer it. So before the legal department get the referral, everything is checked and all the evidence is with it at the point of referral. So any issues should have been picked up prior to that point.
Right, and what is your gut instinct of department's role in invoice raising now? Has it improved?
There have been I've been aware of good feedback and improvements from recent communications we've done over the last 6 months in terms of putting reminders on the Teams group that we have, putting a presentation on for best practice and things that the service departments should be doing. So it does all help. You know, we can always reiterate these points. You know, there are always new staff coming to the departments or they may forget. So it's always worth issuing timely reminders for these main points for good practice in the service departments. But I would say generally there has been an improvement.
Thank you.
I think you're working more closely with departments as well, Michelle, aren't you? And that's reaped its own rewards. And I think the Teams channel really does help as well.
Yeah, obviously the Teams channel is global for all departments, but we do, if we notice a particular issue with a service area, then we will work more closely with that service area to work through any problems that there might be, or just to generally improve that debt recovery.
Okay, thank you.
So Leslie Walton, if you've got another question, your hand's up.
Yes, this report's very good. It's giving us a very clear snapshot in time. I'm just wondering, can we have a similar set of figures again in a few months' time, so we can monitor what the progress is? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, the recommendation on this report is that the Governance and Audit Committee note that officers will continue to report to CMT on a quarterly basis as a further update on the debt position across the authority. So I think we have to recognise the additional scrutiny that's been applied by the CMT on a quarterly basis. But could I suggest that we have another update after that CMT meeting, the next quarter's CMT meeting? I'm not quite sure what month that will be in, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can let Jeremy know what month that would be in, so it could be added to the Audit Committee work programme, Governance and Audit Committee. Simon Cockins, you've got a hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just another update really for members. As this is a fundamental audit, we do the fundamental recommendation tracker exercise normally after September, so it would be October, with a view to recording that and reporting it back to you in November's meeting. So that would form part of the fundamental tracker report in due course as well.
Okay, that's fine. Okay then, unless there are any more questions then, do we have to take a vote on this one, that we're happy for the CMT to continue their quarterly?
Show of hands with that.
If you can have a show of hands, please, then I'll hand over to Jeremy.
Can we go through? Yeah, okay. Okay, so as for the recommendation, Councillor Peter Black.
4.
Julie Davis.
4.
Councillor David Halliwell. Pardon me. Councillor David Halliwell.
4.
Councillor Terry Hennigan. Don't think he's here. Councillor Paxton Hood Williams. No. Councillor Oliver James.
4.
Councillor Jeff Jones. I think he's left. Okay. Councillor Mike Lewis.
4.
Councillor Clive Lloyd, apologies. Chair.
4.
Councillor Sam Pritchard.
4.
Councillor Jen Rayner. Councillor Jen Rayner?
4.
Okay. Councillor Leslie Walton?
4.
Councillor Mike White?
4.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much for that, everyone, and thank you also to Sharon and Michelle again. If you wish to leave, then happy for you to do so.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is agenda item 9, which Tracy Meredith is going to take us through, and it's the lay members on the Governance and Audit Committee paper.
Thank you, Chair. The committee will recall that the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, which was introduced earlier this year, imposed some changes on the Governance and Audit Committee. Now, some of those changes have already been implemented with reports being taken to Council, namely the change in the name of the Audit Committee to the Governance and Audit Committee, and also you had some additional functions added to your terms of reference under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. All those changes needed to be put in place by now, so they were done accordingly. The one outstanding change that we do now need to consider is that as of May 2022, we must ensure that the membership of the Governance and Audit Committee consists of 1/3 lay members. Now, the committee is subject to the political balance rule, and the Head of Den Services is very helpfully set out in paragraph 2.2, a table which he's put together which gives you some sort of idea as to what the committee size would be and how many lay members you would need and how many councillors and what the breakdown by political group would be depending on the size of the committee. You'll also see the note underneath where there is a suggestion by the Head of Den Services that it seems to be logical that the committee size is divisible by 3 because the figures have to be rounded up to make sure that you've got the 3rd membership of lay members. I think it would also be remiss of me not to remind you that the last time this matter was brought back to the Governance and Audit Committee as part of a roundup of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act recommendations, and also the previous changes that we've made to the Governance and Audit Committee. And when Jason Garcia was present, both myself and Jason Garcia agreed that to be a more effective group, you should perhaps look at a smaller number making up the committee so that the lay members and the councillors would perhaps be down the lower end, so maybe looking at 9 or 12 councillors on that committee, rather than going actually higher. So I just wanted to remind you of that discussion because I know Jason Garcia is unfortunately not present today, and I'm sure he would have repeated that advice that he gave at a previous committee meeting. So you'll see that the recommendation there is set out at page 120, and that is for the committee to decide amongst yourself whether you can put forward a recommendation to council as to what you consider the appropriate size would be, bearing in mind that as of May 2022, you do need to ensure that 1/3 of your membership comprises lay members. I don't think there's anything else I can add, but I'm more than happy to take any questions that you might have.
Councillor Leslie Walton's hand is up.
Thanks, Chair. I'm particularly concerned at maintaining as many councillors as possible, and I'm also not very convinced by this idea a smaller committee is necessarily a better one. I certainly would not be at all happy if the committee size reduced under 15. Personally, I would like it to be more, to retain more councillors. And I'm even concerned that even that means we lose 3 councillors. But as I say, I would certainly recommend that we have 15 members going forward, which would mean 10 councillors and 5 lay people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Black.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say quite the opposite, actually, because my experience, smaller committees are quite more effective. I don't think we need to go as low as 9, but I do think 12 seems to me to be a reasonable number for the committee to have. That would have 4 lay members then, as opposed to 5. I noticed the report refers to the difficulty in recruiting lay members, though it does seem to me that you have to go quite low before you get a smaller number of lay members. But it does seem to me that 12 is a reasonable number to have. have, that still involves 8 councillors on a politically balanced basis, and it seems to me that that enables the committee to move forward in a more effective manner. But obviously, it's up to other members what they feel.
Okay, Councillor Jennifer Rayner.
Thank you, Chair. My preference is that we keep the committee at 15. We are a large organisation with a large budget. We also pride ourselves on being a member-led authority, and I think it's important that as many members as possible have experience in an audit committee. Can you follow me? There's a real echo on this system. My second observation is with regard to obtaining lay members, and I don't wish to offend either of the 2 lay members who are with us at present. I do know that both the Cardiff government and the Westminster government, who are frequently appealing for lay members, quite rightly so, to go on a wide range of bodies, do produce some excellent packs setting out what the terms of reference are, what the job involves, and what the competencies are that people from a wide range of backgrounds shows. It's a very positive approach. And there's opportunities to contact persons setting up the schemes to discuss in more detail. So I don't know what Swansea's method of attracting lay members is. I've never been aware of it, so I suggest it's pretty minimal with a "we've got a vacancy, are you interested?" rather than actually going out and looking. And secondly, I think it's really important that we do, or whoever makes a decision for selecting lay members, checks that there is a wider interest. I have sat on a number of small committees and large conferences where the layperson's interest is really a single issue one, rather than delivering the larger corporate issues which are involved. And I'm thinking particularly business interests on regional employment, and some cases where I've been on school governors thinking this isn't just about your child, there's the whole wider issue we're looking at. So to repeat, I would like to see us retain the larger committee, and I would like us to have a much more proactive way of seeking lay members, because I suspect we will have to find more on different bodies as time progresses. So that's it. So happy to support this suggestion that we go for 15.
Can I just respond to the issue about the recruitment of lay members for you, Councillor Rayner? I attended an All Wales Chairs meeting recently, which was the sessions at the conference were led by the WLGA, the Public Service Ombudsman and Audit Wales. And the issue of recruitment was raised in a session by the WGLA. And the work they're doing is putting together model job descriptions, packs on how things should be done, and they're also willing to support local authorities in a number of ways in gaining the right people with the right specifications and the right qualifications to be able to fulfil the role of that lay member on the audit committee. That work is already ongoing, and I believe Swansea have accessed some of that support. I've emailed Adam Hill and Hugh Evans, just giving them a brief summary of what went on that Chairs Network meeting. It was excellent, I have to say. With regards to the lay member, myself and Julie, the role was advertised quite widely. I was interviewed by every member of the audit committee at that time. There was quite a challenging number of questions posed to me, and there were others interviewed at the same time as well, I believe. And obviously I was offered the post on the basis of my considerable experience in audit, governance, risk and control, and having led an internal audit service for 20 plus years in health. And since then, I've also been appointed to South Wales Police Audit Committee, where I was approached on that occasion. And that's for me. And Julie, I know, went through the same process where she was interviewed by members of the Appointments Committee, and the members of that Appointments Committee made the decision on Julie's appointment. So it was done with a formal structure, and it was by no means a straightforward interview. It was quite challenging, the questions were, and I'm sure Julie would concur with the approach as well. So just for a point of clarification for the record, that's what happened. But the WGLA are willing to support and have supported Swansea in ensuring however many is going to be needed, they are indeed going to be suitably qualified, and there will be a rigorous process of appointing.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies if I caused any offence to you.
No, I'm not offended at all. That's what we're here for, is to challenge. But just for the record, I think it's right to put it back as to Swansea did recruit appropriately and robustly, and it was a fair and equitable process. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, and just to add to that, we do welcome any assistance we can have from the WLGA, because if you think about it, there are 22 authorities in Wales that will all be considering lay membership appointment to lay governance and audit committees. And don't forget, as in the previous report that's been brought to the committee by Martin Nichols, the CJCs also have a requirement to appoint lay members to their governance and audit committees as well. So there will be a call on lay members with the appropriate skills and knowledge to become lay members on the governance and audit committees, both for local authorities and for CJCs.
And I understand the personal spec for the WGLA have written up are very, very challenging for a lot of people to fulfil all the requirements of that spec. So, okay, so we're talking about numbers. So we got Leslie Wharton thinking 15, Peter Black 12, and Councillor Jeffery 15. So Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to support my colleagues, Councillor Walton and Councillor Rayner, because, you know, I think if we reduce further and people were unable to attend, we could end up where we won't be able to hold a meeting, so the meeting would be quorate, so we couldn't conduct the important business of the meeting. So I would certainly support keeping it at 15 for that reason.
Shall we take a view from every member, and perhaps Jeremy, you can write down.
You will need to vote on it.
Yeah,
so you can either vote on, we will agree that 15 is the appropriate number if you wish to do it that way, unless anyone else has any other suggestions.
Okay, well, we've got 15 and we've got 12. So are there any other suggestions? Any other numbers other than 15 and 12? Julie?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to suggest 9 because I think that would be the optimum level.
Okay.
I mean, if it helps at the network, the Old Wales Chairs network, I think the consensus around the chairs across Wales, which you will know most of which were lay members, there was one or two that weren't. They were elected members, but the number that the consensus there was the 9 and the 12. It was about an equal balance. If that helps, but
15 seems to be the most popular. So do you want to vote on 15?
Okay, do you want to take a vote on 15 first then?
Okay. This is for 15, so Councillor Peter Black.
My vote is 12, so no.
Okay. Julie Davis.
No, against.
Councillor David Halliwell.
4.
Councillor Oliver James.
4.
Councillor Jeff Jones back. No. Councillor Mike Lewis.
4.
Chair. Right, okay. Councillor Sam Pritchard.
4.
Councillor Jen Rayner.
4.
Councillor Leslie Walton.
4.
Councillor Mike White.
4.
Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 7 for and 3 against.
So Chair, can I just add that clearly is a vote in favour of 15 members of the Governance and Audit Committee. Can I just remind you, it is only a recommendation to full council. Full council will need to make that decision. But can I suggest, and subject to your approval and the Chair's approval, that in that report that is taken to full council, that we do indicate that, albeit the 15 was a unanimous decision, that there were some members of the committee that were in favour of 12, and there were some members in favour of 9 as well. We will incorporate that into the full report to council. I think that's only fair.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that input. If we can move on to agenda item 10, which is Simon referring to audit monitoring report, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Bear in mind we've got very little time left. I'll assume most of the report's been read already. I'll just pick up the key points. So this is the first quarterly monitoring report for 21-22, outlining the work completed by the team in that period. Section 2 indicates we had 21 audits finalised in the quarter, as shown in Appendix 1, and Appendix 2 provides a summary of the scope of those reviews. Of those orders issued, 12 were high assurance and 9 were substantial assurance, and we had 109 audit recommendations, and 100% of those were accepted by management. Appendix 3 gives a snapshot of the progress against the annual plan, so it lists the audits and what position we're at for the planned audits for the year. As you can see, we issued 19 audits from the plan, which is final, with an additional 30 audits in progress at the end of the quarter. No moderate reports were issued in Q1. As I mentioned earlier, we are due to do the follow-up of the moderate audit of management of absence by the end of September. Just want to draw members' attention to 3.3 in relation to the Grand Theatre. Obviously, that was a moderate report when it was issued, but obviously the theatre has been closed since lockdown. It's due to reopen in October, but we need to hold off doing the follow-up review until probably Q4 to give staff time to bed in the recommendations. In that respect, I would advise members to ask the Head of Cultural Services to come back to committee, possibly in the January meeting, to provide an update on what's been done since the last attendance, purely because there were quite a few issues that we highlighted, and I want things to be reported back in terms of progress before we do the follow-up report. I've also included for the first time in this quarter report an update on fraud action plan. As members might remember, Audit Wales issued 2 reports recently with an action plan for us to take forward. So there's an update on our progress in implementing those recommendations in Appendix 4 as well, which shows we've made quite a lot of progress against those recommendations. And then to summarise the appendices, Appendix 1 is just a list of the orders finalised and the assurance rating. Appendix 2 gives a summary of the scope. And then Appendix 3 is the plan, and then Appendix 4 is the action plan for the fraud. So I'm happy to take any questions from members.
Okay, are there any questions on this report, please? I would sort of recommend that we do invite the Cultural Services Head to come back to the committee at the timing that Simon suggested. But Julie Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on Appendix 4, Simon. Several of the completion timescales have been exceeded. So can you document the revised delivery timescales so that we can monitor progress, please?
Sorry, Julie, you broke up quite badly there. I didn't catch what you were saying, sorry.
In Appendix 4, several of the completion timescales have been exceeded. So can you document the revised delivery dates for us, please, so that we can monitor progress?
Yes, no problem, Julie. I think we mentioned when the fraud investigators attended the meeting previously, obviously with the workload that they have, this was a very challenging sort of timescale to meet in the first instance. Some of them have been extended or exceeded, so I'll bring back a report in the next quarterly report, if that's okay, Julie, with an updated schedule for completion, if that would be okay.
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
Yeah.
That as well, because that was one of the questions I was going to raise. Are there any other questions on this report? No, I was a little concerned with what was in Appendix 2 with regard to the Vulnerable Learners Service and the Legal Dem Service Business Intelligence reports, which I've raised outside of the meeting with Simon. So I have had some reassurance that appropriate action has been taken against those recommendations. But that's the only things I spotted on there. So there's no other questions. Again, this is for information. Simon, do you want to move on to your next item?
Yes, bear with me, Chair.
Follow-up.
Yeah, agenda item 11. This is just a standard follow-up report, which documents the outcome of the follow-up that we've been doing in Q1 of previous issued reports. This doesn't include fundamentals. A separate report will come to committee in November for fundamentals. It's just a standard follow-up work for our standard audits. As shown in Appendix 1 of the report, that is the list of all the follow-ups that were completed in Q1, which shows at the bottom of the page of 122 recommendations that have been accepted by management. 120 of those had been fully implemented in our follow-up exercise. The 2 recommendations that weren't fully implemented are shown in Appendix 2 in relation to Passport to Leisure and Cymru Cairo Primary. Both of those are assessed as low-risk recommendations. And there's an update there for members in the last column as to why that's not being completed to date. That's it, Chair. It's a fairly straightforward report, really.
Okay, and again, that's for information. So are there any questions? If not, we can move on to the final 2 items on the agenda. The first one is the Action Tracker report, which we review at each meeting to ensure that what we're asking for is coming back in a timely fashion. I do have a couple of queries on it, so if you can just bear with me just for the purpose of the minutes. Minute reference 9, which is the 9th of June. This is the issue around the external audit recommendations being tracked from Audit Wales. That was left with Adam. I chased Adam to see if the information that I received for him from Cardiff Council was of help, and I've yet to have a response. So if Jeremy can chase Adam on that one, that would be helpful. And there are there's one on the bottom of page 155, which is minute reference 41, the 19th of February. You've closed the risk management training, but in light of the conversations today, if you can leave that open for the time being, please. Are there any other questions? I've got Leslie Walton, Councillor Leslie Walton.
Thanks, Chair. It's not a question, it's actually just an observation about the order of agenda. I'm sure I've raised this before. I think the quarterly reports are very important, and it bothers me that they tend to be left towards the end of the meeting. And it's also just occurred to me that maybe also the action tracker is also quite important. And perhaps that ought to also be moved up. Because after all, the main reason I see myself attending these meetings is to, if you like, the phrase I always use is audit the audit. So I think the quarterly report and the action tracker are probably the most important thing, and hence should be higher up the agenda. Just an observation which you may or may not agree with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Adam's in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to come back on certainly the audit tracker actions. We're not just looking at audit, we're looking at all the way across the council in terms of what's coming from scrutiny and how we track all of those point, including and importantly, what's happening within governance and audit. We've been in touch with Cardiff Council amongst other councils. We've got a list of companies and processes that they utilise. We have a number of demonstrations over the coming weeks to get a system in place that will see us to be able to put a really good quality action tracker in place, utilising some of the processes, and certainly Cardiff has helped, along with RCT and others, to shape our thinking in how we can do that. So that will be put in place shortly once we've gone through and looked at the various systems, so that we can accurately and easily monitor and report to future audit and governance committees.
Thank you, Adam. That's pleasing to hear. Simon?
Thanks, Chair. Just a very brief query or comment really from Leslie. I'm not really sure why the reports have seemed to get to the end of the agenda, because they did end up being at the start for some reason, but they seem to have fallen back down again. I'm not sure why that's the case, but I mean, I'm happy to speak to Jeremy to make sure they're pushed up the agenda a little bit for further discussion. I think would be useful.
Okay, thank you. I've got no preference.
Thank you.
I've got no preference because, you know, we get opportunity to discuss and challenge. I guess they've slipped down because we're inviting other people to use them.
Basically.
Ben.
On that matter, Chair, yes, I think that's it. It probably is because we've invited people in, but I do have a preference, and I am with Councillor Walton. Whilst it's important you get through all the business, given your primary role is a strategic oversight, I am minded to agree with Councillor Walton that those items should probably go first, and that you squeeze the specific issue items at the end. I mean, you do manage to run it to the 2 hours, Chair, but that would be my advice too. And I think Simon has alluded to that. We can take it out and discuss with Jeremy as to what's the best running order, but I do have a clear preference for them being early on for the strategic oversight aspect, if that helps.
That's fine. I'm happy with either. Can I just mention there's one final item on the action plan, or the tracker, was about the local transport plan. Recognising the work now with the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee is whether we need to close that off. Any views from members? It's the final item on the tracker. Can we discuss, Adam, can we pick that up outside of the meeting? Adam?
Yeah, happy to pick that up, Chair. Sorry, I was nodding.
Okay.
Didn't get my hand off mute.
Okay, that's fine then. Okay. So if we can agree then that picking up Councillor Walton and Ben's preference that the future meetings, the internal audit reports will come first. So if we can do that.
Yeah.
Councillor Black.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Chair whether this local transport plan would be overtaken by the joint committees having a responsibility for a regional plan. So it just seems to me that doing both at the same time is a bit silly. So I'm just wondering whether that would be fall by the wayside as a result of that.
Yeah, that was my thoughts, but you know, perhaps we can take Adam's steer on that one as well.
Yeah, Chair, yeah, it makes perfect sense that it would be overtaken by it. I think it's just a timing issue in terms of what we were trying to develop ourselves and when the region and the CJC is set up. So it might be that the learning that we have through that early part of development will just feed into that regional plan. So I think there is still a need to do some of that work and feed into the CJC when it's finally established and in place.
Okay, thank you. The final item, I'm minded of time now, is the work plan for 21-22. I've asked Jeremy before the meeting if he could incorporate the new areas that's been identified in the new terms of reference for the Governance and Audit Committee around the annual self-assessment report, the performance reports, the complaints reports, and the Council's arrangements to secure value for money and review assurances assessments. If they can be built in, and if we can rely on Simon, Ben, and Adam to assist in that process, I'd be really grateful. I'm not sure if there are any other comments on either of those papers, the tracker or the work plan. If not, no. Can I thank everyone for their participation today, and I'll draw the meeting to a close. But thank you all very, very much indeed, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.